Hey guys, and welcome to another pre-release analysis for some of the characters coming to NIKKE. In this video, we will be taking a look at Jackal, Viper, and Cocoa, characters that are scheduled to be released after Modernia's banner. As I always say at the beginning of my analysis videos, things are still subject to change, especially when it comes to number values, and if history repeats itself, any changes made will not be too drastic, and the character will essentially still work the same way on release. So treat this as a preparation on what you can expect from these characters, and also let me know how you feel about them in the comments below. So the first character we will be taking a look at is Jackal. Jackal is a Burst Type 1 rocket launcher user, and she is also classified as a defender from the Missileless line of units. Right off the bat, she is in kind of a rough spot just because of the fact that she is a Burst Type 1 unit. What this means is that she will be competing against other Burst Type 1 units for a spot in your team. And when you look at the Burst 1 units that we currently have, a lot of them are very strong. So Jackal's kit needs to be somewhat on the same level to justify using her over the other units. But with that said, most of the new characters that we got are Burst Type 3. So it's nice to have more Burst 1 and Burst 2 units. Her skill 1, Happy Jackal, activates when she gets hit 10 times. And this will apply debuffs on your enemy with the highest HP. The first debuff will increase the damage received for that enemy by 9.09% at level 10. The second effect will decrease the enemy's attack power by 9.09%, and these will last for 10 seconds. First of all, this will be very good for single target scenarios because you will obviously apply her debuffs on the same target every time you proc this ability. But a big downside to this is the skill condition, because realistically, getting hit 10 times is highly dependent on multiple factors. For one, it depends on the stage enemy density, because the more enemies you have on the field, the more likely it is for Jackal to get hit and proc this effect. And the opposite also applies. This type of skill condition also depends on the enemy you're up against, because some enemies have more frequent attack patterns than others. But the biggest factor to consider is your team composition. If you have characters that have shields or a taunt, this will make it less likely for Jackal to proc this ability because they will stop the enemy's attack from getting to Jackal. Well, yes, this ability does not have a cooldown, but because of the skill condition, there is a lot of randomness from this ability, and I would not expect this to proc quite often. Moving on to her skill 2, Cheer Up Jackal. This ability activates at the start of the battle. This applies to Jackal herself and 2 other allies with the highest attack. It will distribute the damage taken for the allies affected by this effect, and it will also increase their defense by 8.27% at level 10, and both effects will last for 2 minutes. This is basically a semi-permanent Anise skill 2, and I call it semi-permanent because it only lasts for 2 minutes. So depending on the content that you are doing, you will either have this active throughout the whole fight, or it expires near the end. And for those who are unfamiliar with how the damage distribution works, it basically reduces the damage taken for the units affected by the skill, and will pass it to the caster. So this is good for the more squishy characters like Scarlet who struggle with survivability. And finally, we have her burst, Crazy Jackal. This ability will apply to all of your allies, and it's on a 20-second cooldown with an iron damage type. It increases your team's burst skill attack damage to one enemy by 38.91% for 15 seconds at level 10. And it also increases your team's defense by 14.69% for 10 seconds. The first effect from this ability is very strong because it has good scaling on the damage bonus, and it applies to all of your allies. This will benefit all of your units, but most importantly, your burst type 3 characters. More specifically, characters that specialize in single target scenarios. So we are looking at characters like Laplace, Sugar, Helm, or any character that has a burst that can focus their damage to a single target. Comparing her to Litter, who is currently the best burst 1 unit we have, they somewhat provide similar utility with a few differences. Jackal provides more survivability by distributing damage and increasing defense, and Litter restores the cover's HP. And they both have their own ways of increasing the team's damage. It's still kind of hard to tell if Jackal will be on the same level or even better than Litter, because if you use Jackal over Litter, you will be losing out on the cooldown reduction that Litter has. But you will be gaining, I'd say, slightly better offensive buffs, so you have to weigh out the differences that they have. If you ask me, I can see Jackal being better in PvP. The single target damage bonus is nice, especially if you are trying to take down their tank. Jackal is also a good option if you are trying to push hard on the special arena, so that you have another unit which is similar to Litter in many ways that you can use in your other teams. Moving on, the next character we have is Viper. Viper is a burst type 2 shotgun user that is classified as an attacker from the Tetra line of units. Her skill 1, Snake Sense, activates when hitting a marked target and affects all of your allies. The first buff will increase your team's attack by 25.98% at level 10, and the second effect will increase your team's hit rate by 11.13%. This one is pretty straightforward because the increased attack is always good, and the increased hit rate will be good for your shotgun units so that they have a tighter bullet spread, and it can also be good for other weapons when attacking faraway targets. Her skill 2, Snake Scale, permanently applies a 3.43% hit rate buff to Viper. The second effect of this ability only applies to Viper, and is activated at the beginning of full burst mode. This will taunt the enemy that attacks Viper if they do not have a mark on them. And this ability also has an additional effect that gives Viper invincibility for 1 second. The hit rate buff is self-explanatory, but the second effect doesn't look appealing. For one, I don't really see why you would want to taunt the enemies using Viper, especially since she is classified as an attacker. Secondly, the 1 second invincibility just sounds like a gimmick. You can technically delay your burst 3, so you can time the invincibility effect properly, but I don't think it's worth the trouble just for a 1 second invincibility for one character. So it's gonna be up to you if you think it's worth doing so. And moving on to her burst, Snakebite. This will mark an enemy and deal 462.85% of Viper's attack as damage. If the target is already marked, this will also decrease the enemy's defense by 19.83% for 10 seconds at level 10. You can expect this to work very similarly to Isabel's burst, where you will mark the first enemy that you hit after using Viper's burst. This burst is generally good because the damage scaling is pretty high for a burst 2 unit, but it's even better for boss fights because that's the only time you will consistently trigger the second effect on this burst. With that said, Viper is looking to be a good pick for shotgun teams. If you don't have a good burst 2 unit for your shotgun comps, Viper is a great pick. And if you use her with other units that can also increase your team's hit rate, your team will be very effective against close range enemies. And the last character we have on the list, we have Kokowa. She is a burst type 1 sniper rifle user, and she is classified as a support from the Tetra line of units. It's safe to say that she will be the last one getting released out of the characters on the list because she will be related to an upcoming Valentine's Day event. Her skill 1, Professional Origami, is a skill effect that triggers every 15 seconds. This will recover the cover's HP by 17.67% at level 10. This will also remove a random debuff from 2 of your allies with a debuff effect. This ability is similar to Litter's skill 2, but with a significantly lower recovery scaling, and it applies to your whole team. And on top of the cleansing effect, I can see this being useful in many cases, especially if there are things in the game that count as a debuff, like the stun mechanic from the enemies. Her skill 2, Pro Ketchup, activates when she hits a fully charged attack, giving her a mini broom effect that gives Kokowa 4.37% less damage taken for 5 seconds, and this effect can stack up to 15 times. That is around 65% less damage taken at maximum stacks, which is kind of crazy, especially if you use her in the simulation room, where you can get the faster charge attack buff. Moving on to her burst, Pro Made. This burst is on a 20-second cooldown, just like most burst 1 units, and this has a fire damage type. The first effect will remove 1 debuff for all of your allies, and the second effect is triggered when you have maximum stacks of the broom effect from your skill 2, which will then decrease all of your enemies' attack by 13.59% for 10 seconds. Essentially, Kokowa is the cleanser version of Litter. Instead of cooldown reduction, she has 2 cleansing abilities that are triggered quite often. Her skill 1 is on a 15-second cooldown, and her burst is on 20 seconds. But unlike Litter, Kokowa's kit is very situational, because you won't really get much value out of her kit if your enemies don't apply debuffs too often. She can be more viable for PvP because we have a lot of characters that apply debuffs, so being able to remove those effects easily will give you a big advantage. Overall, all of these characters are pretty good. They are great in a specific niche or situation, but they are not necessarily broken like some of the characters we have now. So yeah, that's about everything I have for this video. As always, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.